Hello, my name is John Rose. In this video, I'd like to take a closer look at 3 ways our liver detoxifies our body. And the first way is filtering our blood, then secreting bile, and then using a 2-phase process that neutralizes and eliminates toxins, which I've talked about many times. When we look at how our liver filters our blood, our liver filters approximately 2 quarts of blood every minute. And this is a simple way our body can keep clean by the liver filtering our blood. The second way is by secreting bile. And our liver secretes 1 quart of bile a day, and this is how our body binds toxins to get them out of the body. So this is a good thing to secrete bile. In fact, we need bile to digest fats also. That's the purpose of the gallbladder. Unfortunately, when we get gallstones, the liver gets congested and things stop working well, and this can cause a lot of complications that can lead to things like cancer, for example. Just to name a few, because the liver does so many things. Now, what we have to understand is that in nature, bitter stimulates the liver. Oh my God, they're bitter. Can't make a meal out of them. Anal. I love natural hygiene, but what I don't like is some people's interpretation of it. And that's interesting. I'm going to digress and hope I can come back to where I was. But when you look at or you study anybody, it's interesting because I've never found anybody who I think is 100% on everything. Got a lot of people in the 90% range. And then it's interesting, what I decide is the 10% I don't believe in. And I think that we all do similar things, I'm sure. We accept things that we either they fit our belief system or they make sense or whatever. And then there's some things that we have too many references that this new belief doesn't challenge. Now, I find it interesting, if someone comes along and says 100 things to you, and 98 of them just blow your mind, you never heard them before, but you know they made sense because it was so logical. But then they say 2 things that you can't accept because you have too many references that tell you otherwise. Now, you must ask yourself, does this guy know 2 more things that I don't know? Is this the 2% we got to throw away? You know, you can't accept everything what people say. You got to throw something away. Be careful what we throw away, and be careful what we accept, because a lot of people think what people say is 100%, and then they take everything they say. And that's what's happened with natural hygiene when it comes to understanding how to use herbs. And the classic example here with herbs is the Hoxsey formula. Now, the Hoxsey formula, interestingly, Harry Hoxsey took his grandfather's formula that his horse used, that he used to heal animals. He was a veterinarian, and his horse came down with cancer. And instead of doing anything to treat the horse, he just said, I'll just let you go out into the field and let you finish off your days. But then he noticed this horse started eating things he normally didn't eat, paid attention to them. You know, see, animals know what to do when they get sick. They stop eating or they look for bitter foods that will stimulate the liver so it can get rid of the toxins. And every herb that this horse was eating was bitter. So Hoxsey put together this formula, and it turns out it works for people too. Now, this is what I call part of the art. And a big problem with the art is too many use it without the science, meaning they don't change their way of life. Mainly because they don't have knowledge of how to live, or if they find it, they don't want to apply it. So there's a slippery slope whenever we use the art. And we have to understand that there's a time and a place to use certain things and do certain things. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a real big fan of using herbs when it comes to cancer. When I coach people, I let them know what their options are. I give them my files. But I think the body can do all it needs to without using herbs. But there is a time and a place to use it. If your kidneys aren't filtering, very important. We have to make sure they're working. But do we have to do anything extraordinary to make it happen? Many times we don't. See, this is why a big percentage of natural hygiene is accurate. In most cases, the best thing to do is nothing. I've acknowledged that many times. But there is a time and a place to realize that if the body's impaired, and hygienists know this because they know there's 5 stages to inflammation, and the 5th one is one that confuses everyone. It's the impairment of function. So if you have an organ that's not functioning and it needs to, something landed on me, and it needs to do something we need, like the pancreas, and we need insulin, or the thyroid, we need thyroxine, well, obviously we need to apply the art there and give the body what it needs. Well, there's all sorts of things our body's doing that it might not be able to do, and we might want to support them, realizing that in most cases, if we just give that organ a rest and give it the nourishment it needs, it can heal itself. Now, do we need to give it any extra outside nourishment? Can it live on itself? Yes, but this is where we get in trouble with the 3rd way our liver detoxifies the body. and that is this two-phase process. But before I go there, I do want to mention about, and then get back to where I was digressing, right, about the bitter foods. I do want to mention about the Hoxsey formula. You can watch this on YouTube. I remember seeing this documentary a long time ago, and I just went searching for it before I came out here, and I found a preview of it, and I think I found the actual documentary that I saw a long time ago, and it's really worth watching because there's a battle between Hoxsey and the authorities. You see, the authorities don't like people healing us. In fact, I'll digress another time here. I heard this a long time ago, and I find it fascinating. There were a lot of witches that were burned in the 1500s in Europe. These people were herbalists. There's a battle. The people who rule the world have to keep us sick. They have to keep us in a state of starvation, in slavery, in need of feudalism, which is why that's what they're doing now. It's not about them making money, it's about us not having the money. And that's why I always go back to that piece of the puzzle in my videos, because of all the damage we have to do and correct downstream, our society is one of the big ones. And I'm going to digress a couple of times here, and it should all come back together. It's going back to whether you take 100% of what someone says. Because I remember when I studied Shelton, I loved what he had to say, but I saw some weaknesses in what he said. I also noticed he didn't talk about certain things. And I'm always out there trying to find all the pieces as many as I can to make sure I'm not missing any. And I put pieces together that Shelton didn't have. And then later I came upon Henry Lindler, and I read about Shelton, going to his college a long time ago, and saw some of his quotes throughout his book. But I never really read what Lindler was saying, and I'm going, oh my God, I'm saying what Lindler was saying. I filled in the pieces that Shelton omitted. It's like, okay, Shelton said, I'll take 90% of what I'm not going to have this 10%. Well, I found that 10% and added it back, and then I'm studying Lindler. I go, oh my God, Shelton, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you tell this? In fact, there's only one time I found where Shelton did this, the lymph system of service, when he talked about the lymph nodes and how they get enlarged for a reason. They're trying to protect the body. They're working, they're getting bigger to do their job. That was the only time I'd really ever seen him really give justice to the lymph system. But Lindner understood this, and this goes back to Germany, and this is how it's all going to tie back together. Because Lindner took the knowledge that was in Europe, mainly from Germany, in the middle 1800s, and we knew what was causing disease back then. Our body's nothing but a bunch of cells and two fluids, blood and lymph. Doctors study the body and the blood, but not the lymph. The problems come from the lymph backing up into the system. And Lindner explained that, and then I find, after I studied Lindner, I finally looked into more about what Robert Morris is saying. I'm saying, oh, I know whose shoulders he's standing on. I see where the knowledge is coming from. It goes back to Germany. And now this is what we have to understand. The rulers of the world have to keep us from being healthy and prosperous. So they murder herbalists in the name of witchcraft. And they're the true magicians, by the way. And that's what the rulers of the world do. They trick us and they say, look at history. They're the bad guys, but they're really the good guys. And we're the good guys, and we're really the bad guys. So that's what they did. And this goes back to Ishmael. We said there are takers and leavers. The leavers told a story, warning everybody about the takers. The takers came in, they took the story, and they said, we're the leavers, they're the takers. You see, that's what they do in history. When you look at history, take the good guys, and they're going to be labeled the bad guys. So that's what happened when Germany and Japan started flourishing. They were thriving when the rest of the world was starving, because the people who rule the world had to keep us enslaved and poor, like feudalism. This is neo-feudalism. So it's not about how much money they make. They got more than we can even comprehend. They just got to make sure we don't have it. And Germany and Japan was proving that to the world. So what did the powers that be do? They had to attack them just like they attacked the witches, the herbalists. Don't you see? That's why they attack people who have the truth that will wake us up from this nightmare. So the point here is that Germany was actually the best country in Europe at the time. That's why they had to be destroyed and labeled the bad guys. They were the best. And if you don't believe me, do a little research with George Patton. Now, General George Patton was the military governor of Germany after we came in, and the true Holocaust happened in Germany. Watch Hailstorm and let the tears flow, and you'll realize the lies, the lies, the lies. That's the true Holocaust. Now, when you look at what General Patton said when he went over to Germany, you know what he said? I'm the military governor over here, and I'm looking at everybody. You know, I see the English and the French, the Russians and the Jews. Oh my God, the last two were despicable, disgusting creatures. You wouldn't believe how they lived. And then when you look at the Britons and the French and the Germans were way above everyone else. They were the best that Europe had to offer. And we know what General Patton said. He said, we fought the wrong people. We destroyed a good race, the best race on the planet. And that's how evil works. And they've been labeled the bad guys. The bad guys, look what they did. They made up all that crap just to make sure we don't understand we live on an abundant planet. And that's the point that we have to understand. And we can't wake up until we go upstream. This is downstream. I talk about doing both things. And I know most of you are just saying, John, just tell me how to do upstream. Well, I'm doing that now. There's 3 ways the liver detoxifies itself. And I digressed. I told you I would in that where it talks about the secreting the bile, and it got into Hoxie and how that ties into Germany and how they're controlling the money. It's all about money. The reason why Japan and Germany and Japan were thriving when the rest of the world were starving by design is because they took over their money supply. That's all we got to do is just take back our money supply. Quit letting someone else do it. That's how we're being conquered. John Adams, there's 2 ways to conquer a nation. One is by the sword, the other is by debt. We're being conquered by debt. And that's what Germany and Japan proved to the world. That's why they've been demonized. Bad people. Look at George Patton, General Patton. We destroyed the best people in Europe. They knew how to heal. They had that knowledge. Henry Lindler brought it over. It's not complicated. It's so simple. It's mind-boggling. All you got to do is go on a solid food vacation. Support your body in case it's damaged. That's where we can use herbs or other things in case we need to. And no, not all herbs are toxins. Again, you can't believe 100% of what you read from somebody. There are always going to be some things they can't understand, just like with T.C. Fry republished John Tilden's book. He took every reference Tilden made to enemas out of the book. I would be fit to be tied if I wrote a book and someone took parts of it out and saying this is what he says. Oh, I don't believe in enemas. I'm anal retentive. I had a bad potty training experience, so poo-poo enemas and colonics. Plus, I'm doing a fasting retreat. Last thing I want to do is deal with that shit, right? Well, I can understand why someone who has a fasting retreat like Doug Graham and Lauren Lockwood doesn't want to get into the enemas. If you're selfish, man, oh man, don't you want to help these people? You don't have to do it all the time in the first week especially. And if they get dehydrated, my God, you can kill someone if you don't have access to IV fluids, but you can save their life by doing a water enema. You can do a flaxseed retention enema and solve a problem if you have inflamed intestines, colitis. You can do the coffee enema, which I'm going to use one more to finish this section out before I go to the next one, to help secrete the flow of bile. So when we do a coffee enema, what we do is we inject it up here so it's in the descending colon. We lay on the right side of our body. The liver's over here by way of gravity. The liver, by way of gravity, the coffee goes into the liver through the hemorrhoidal veins, opens up the bile ducts and secretes bile. Now, there are a lot of herbs that do that. Remember, bitter foods do that also. But if we're toxic and we got gallstones, then there's a real good likelihood that we're not going to get that stuff out of us. And they'll get reabsorbed. And the coffee enemas, they didn't know this until quite some time later. I remember getting an email from many years after I'd been aware, probably over 15 years, 10, 12 years or so, after I'd first heard Charlotte speak in the early 1990s, where I got an email from them saying, oh, we found why the coffee enemas work, because the herbs will do this also, but there are substances called palmitates, that's in coffee that bind 7 times to the toxins so they can get then excreted out of the body. So there's a time and a place to do a coffee enema, a water enema, a flaxseed retention enema. There's time to use the Hoxie formula herbs if you have certain cancer conditions that we find these to be beneficial to. But remember, never do the art without the science. Don't do the coffee enemas without doing the science. You got to change your way of life, number one. Now, how can you correct 5 main mistakes? Remember, there are 3 ways to correct 5 main mistakes. One's a raw vegan diet. That's hard to do for most of us. Can't handle the transition to a few grams of fiber to a bunch of grams of fiber. The other is the water fast. But remember, when we do a water fast, we're not giving our body certain level 2 nutrients. We're not dealing with that second group of needs. And this can be dangerous when we do a water fast, because a water fast is like a raw vegan diet. It only works in an ideal world. We don't live in an ideal world anymore. That's why we have this other group of needs. So even when you adopt a raw vegan diet, there may be things we need because our body is not functioning. It's impaired. Hopefully just temporary. It's got a little inflammation. The inflammation goes away. The impairment goes away. But we have to realize we have these 2 groups of needs. And the thing about the water fast, we're not getting any glutathione, we're not getting any energy except from the body cannibalizing itself, so there's not really a surplus of energy. And we need these type of nutrients in order to complete a 2-phase process our liver goes through. This is the 3rd way our liver detoxifies our body. It's a 2-phase process. And I'll make this real simple. Imagine the first phase is where someone goes into your body and grabs all the garbage up, or let's say they go into your house and they put all the garbage in a plastic bag and they come out and they set it on the curb. That's the first phase. And what that's doing in our body is, see, our body in its wisdom knows how to protect itself. It stores toxins inside fat cells. That's why they know how to determine how much environmental toxins are in the environment by looking at plants and animals and looking at their fat cells. It's like, fat cells are like sweeping the garbage under the rug. The fat cells are the rug, you see what I'm saying? So we sweep the garbage in our fat cells. And what's the best way to say this? So what happens is when we do the first phase of this two-phase process, the body takes those toxins out of the fat cells, makes them fat, instead of fat soluble, make them water soluble, so they can be eliminated, you see. But the key here is when we get them out of the fat cells and they're not fat soluble anymore, they're water soluble, now they can do damage. Remember, we swept them under the rug for a reason. They're in the fat cell to protect the rest of the body, but now they're open. It's like putting that garbage out on the curb so the garbage bin can come and take it away. Well, phase 2 is the garbage bin. That's the glutathione. Those are the things you don't get on a water fast. And when you don't get those things, what you got instead are a bunch of thugs that come out there, they kick open the bags of garbage and the garbage goes everywhere, meaning those poisons can then damage our healthy tissues. Again, our body stores these toxins in fat cells for a reason, to protect the rest of the body. So this is the big danger of doing a water fast and having too many environmental toxins inside of us. Now we know when babies are born, what's that number? 287 toxic chemicals are in the umbilical cord of a child when it's born, a newborn baby. And this goes back to the comment about zeolite, where Doug says we don't have a zeolite deficiency, showing his ignorance, not even knowing what zeolite is. And yet Dr. Gabriel Cousins did an amazing study out, I guess you'd call it a study, at his place, the Tree of Life, where these women were aware of these environmental toxins in the umbilical cord, and they wanted to get pregnant, but they didn't want to pass those on to their babies, so they wanted to do a cleansing protocol prior to that. And what Gabriel Cousins did is put them on a green juice fast and gave them this zeolite, which is what happens when lava enters into the ocean, and there's this chemical reaction with the oxygen, all the air and the minerals in the water. It forms this new honeycomb-shaped type structure that's really good at pulling things into it, and you can get it out the body. So Dr. Cousins put a bunch of people on this protocol, and within, I think it was a week, the toxins went from 14 to 15 down to 0 to 1 in their brain, their liver, and their breast. And that's pretty phenomenal. So we shouldn't poo-poo things we don't know. There's a lot to the art. Again, we have to be humble. No one can be a master of the art. And when someone comes to you and say, I found something that we know, like GCMAF, for example, we're seeing an 80% cure rate with autism, to not consider doing that, oh my God, it's not nature. Well, it is nature. We produce that. But guess what they're doing? They're putting a substance in vaccines called nagalase that destroys the natural GCMAF we make. And that's why they're seeing such benefits with cancer and other degenerative diseases, especially autism, because this is giving the body what it needs. So we can't be anal about what we believe. How can you believe 100%? Can you believe 100% that I'm saying, God, I wish I was? I think I'm closer than most people I've studied, and that's mainly because I've been able to stand on more shoulders than most of the people I've studied. I've been, a lot has happened since they've been around. But I know I got to empty my cup. You know, there's that old story of that professor that goes to this to Japan, and to the Zen master wants to know about Zen, and the Zen master comes out and pours some tea in his cup, and of course the cup overfills, and the guy's screaming, stop, stop, and my cup's overfill, and of course the message here is you must first empty your cup, otherwise you won't be able to understand what I'm saying. I made a video recently about empty your cup and sit down before fact like a little child. That's what we have to do when it comes to a lot of our knowledge. We have to be willing, especially when it comes to the art of healing. If you think you got all the answers, you better empty your cup a little bit and at least look at certain things and realize whether or not it's something we might consider, because there is a time and a place to support our body. There's a time and a place to help the body secrete more bile. Remember, that's one of the main ways our body cleanses itself. And this was the big secret to Dr. Gerson's protocol, because he found when he gave people all this juice that every cell in their body started emptying out waste matter, and if the liver couldn't handle the toxic load, they kind of describe it like everybody on the freeway trying to exit the same ramp at the same time, and there's a traffic jam. When you do a coffee enema, you basically open up the exit ramp, allowing more toxins to exit the body. So that was a real big part of the Gerson protocol. I'm not convinced that everybody with cancer has to do that. Certain types of cancer, I would definitely consider doing it. The average person, do they need to do it? Well, maybe if you've done a lot of drugs in the past Remember, your liver tries to get rid of these poisons, and when they can't, they store, which is what leads to things like inflammation, which is why we have hepatitis C. It's why we have AIDS. This is drug poison. You know, we're being poisoned by drugs. That's why our liver is not functioning properly. Disease is not an entity that's attacking us. We create our own illness, and the microbe is nothing. The terrain is everything. So if our terrain is damaged, if our liver is not functioning properly, if you're doing a solid food vacation and you're doing everything right, you're drinking plenty of juice, your bowels are moving, you're stimulating your lymph system, you're doing deep breathing exercises, you're walking, jumping on a trampoline, doing hot and cold showers even on certain spots of your body, might even be doing some chalk up shader to help support the gallbladder and the liver, but you still have a cleansing reaction. That would tell me there's a good likelihood that your liver may be congested, or maybe your kidneys aren't filtering. So first thing, look at your urine. Make sure you're filtering, you're seeing something coming out in your urine. Then consider doing a coffee enema. It's very simple, it's not that complicated, not as disgusting as it sounds, and if you're feeling miserable, and that's the problem, guess what's going to happen? You're going to feel like $1 million. And I get feedback from my students all the time when I suggest this to them and they try it. I can't tell anybody what to do. It's not my job, I'm an educator. I give people knowledge so they can make an informed decision. And I try to study as many things as I can. I've studied enough things to know I'm not a master. It's too much out there, man. I'm always updating files and creating new files. I create 300 new files every year. Usually update 10 files a day, but I've been so busy doing this that I realize I'm not learning the same way anymore, but I'm learning better because I'm teaching every day. I'm coming out and teaching you guys every day. And you learn best when you teach. So remember that, everybody. Share this message. And I'm reading your comments, and guys, some of you guys are doing a bang-up job getting out there, interacting, because when you do this, you feel a calm and a serenity about yourself. You feel a love and a presence and how you genuinely want to help people. And that's conveyed, that comes across. I know I get really way out there. It's like, how can this guy be calm? But once you understand the implications of what I'm talking about, and you realize the magnitude of it and how many people are suffering and dying this very instant, it can tear your heart out. And if you're not outraged, then you're dead or you're numbed, which happens to me, unfortunately. It is overwhelming. It's challenging. Better word. So, all we can do is the best we can. Testing ideas, time has come. If you haven't done it, if you're not convinced, listen to Dr. Roba when he was on day 21. Watch the Deborah Duncan show and watch people who had done 2 months and 3 months. The one gal who lost a varicose vein, she said, I think she went like 50-some days. She really went 60 because I include breaking the fast as part of the fast, because that's the hardest part. I'm amazed how many people can't do this the right way. You gotta respect the fact that if you've gone that distance, you gotta know what you're doing when you break the fast. I did a video specifically on breaking the fast, so when you get to that point, just look at that video. Also go to my seminar, but in that seminar, usually my seminars last 4 hours. I was limited to time, and that was less than a 2-hour seminar, so I didn't go into much detail as much as I wanted to on certain subjects, and breaking the fast was one of them. But I did make a separate video on that, so you can go to that. And then go to my seminar that will explain how you do a solid food vacation with an understanding that most of us, all we have to do is just drink the juices, make sure the bowels move, and it's a great experience. But some of us, the bowels either don't move, or our kidneys aren't filtering, or we have a blockage in our colon. There's a myriad of other possibilities that can make this a little challenging in the beginning, which is why I tell you there's 3 things to do. Give the body everything it needs, support the organs of elimination, make sure they're working, and then support the body if it's damaged. And once again, I've said this so many times, when you guys do this, you're in for a treat.